understand. Glad I'm not doing it.
Okay, I'm Morris Walton, and I'm with the Registry History Center, and today, which is April the 11th, 2023, I'm meeting with James Hodges. James is going to be the subject of our interview today. James, thank you for coming and visiting with us today. Why don't you just introduce us to yourself? Tell us where you were born, how old you are today, just some basic information.
Okay, well, I'm James Glenn Hodges. The Glenn comes after my father, Glenn Hodges, and I was born in Gorman, Texas in 1948. My family was from De Leon and Comanche, that area, so Gorman was the place where, back in that time, had really the going hospital, if you can believe it. I mean, Gorman's nothing now, but I don't know how many people I run into that were born in Gorman, Texas, back in that time frame, you know, so it's kind of odd, but so am I. But anyway, so we moved to Granbury in like 1952. My dad worked for the railroad and my mom was a housekeeper. So we moved out on Pearl Street, about where the driver's license and, well, I guess now driver's license, but the registration, car registration center is, in the old jailhouse right there on the corner of Pearl and whatever that is. So anyway, that was our house that Dad rented when he moved to town. And I remember him telling me that the guy he rented from, he called him and he said, yeah, it's available. Dad says, well, when can I get the key? And the guy says, there's no key. Never locks the doors. And that was kind of the way it was for back in that day, because everybody knew everybody in town. If you were new in town, they knew it as well.
So let me ask, how old were you then when y'all moved
I was
here?
probably 5 years old. I'm guessing on 1952, but I remember distinctly living in that house, and I was 5 years old or 6. And my brother, Jared on, he was just born, you know, he was 3 or 4. So we moved in there, and it was just, they planted cotton next door to us. That's how rural it was, but now it's, you know, it's all buildings and of course near the park there.
So now, what did you, when you may have said, I mentioned it, I missed it, what did your dad do?
My dad worked for the railroad. He was at that time got the job in Granbury at the depot down here. He was a telegraph operator, and they called him an agent, I guess. So he worked there, and I can remember going down to the depot with him sometimes when he worked at night, and I remember he had, the way they sent messages to the trains, they didn't have radios, they didn't have, you know, cell phones, of course, but they had a forked stick with a string in between it, and he would get the messages, the car orders and things. Well, you need to drop cars off at Crescent or pick cars up in Toller or whatever, and he would tie that between that string on this fork and had a long stick on it, and he would stand out there by that train, and the conductor or the engineer would stick his hand out, and they would snag that that string. And I remember standing there and holding his britches leg, and the ground is trembling, that train rumbling through there. You know, man, it took some, you had to know what you were doing.
Oh, goodness.
And it was scary, to say the least. But that's what he did. My mom was a housekeeper, and anyway, that's.
So did your mom? She didn't work outside the home. She was a homemaker.
Not at that time. That's right. Yeah. Well, she had 2 boys, and then of course another one born a few years later. But she went. We moved from that Pearl Street house to Christ. We got 2 bedrooms then, and a bath, and then our little brother Barry came along, and that was about 1956 when he was born. And I remember it was snowing because they brought Mom hunting the baby home in the only ambulance in town, you know, and I don't know why they did that, but it was snowing when they brought him home. Things you remember, you know.
Yeah. So let me, I would jump back. you moved to Granbury from Gorman.
Well, from Comanche,
From
actually.
Comanche.
Dad worked for the railroad in Comanche. That's
Comanche.
where he started. Then got transferred to Granbury.
So now, where were you? Were you born in a hospital? And
It was it was called the sanitarium.
okay. Now, where was that? In
Gorman.
Gorman.
I forget the name of this doctor, but anyway, he birthed a lot of babies around in that area, you know. So
Well,
Snyder Sanitarium. That's what it was called.
So tell me just what things were like, you know, growing up in your home. I mean, what was your initial responsibility around you? What was expected of you just growing up?
Well, when we moved to Christ Street, Mom started college. She went to college to finish up because she already had some college. But I remember she would ride with Dorothy Bolton, for instance, and Shirley Hayworth. They were all finishing college, and they would ride to Fort Worth to TWC and do that. And so every morning we had a list. She made a list for Jared Don and I to do, which would include, you know, washing dishes and sweeping the floor, mopping the floor, ironing, whatever. And that was our chores for the morning before we went to school. And then on Saturday morning, we had an even longer list that we had to do before we went out to play. And of course, we had to mow the yard too. So we worked, but we learned a lot of domestic skills, I should say, from my mom, out of necessity.
Yeah, which proved helpful to you.
It's helpful now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and tell me, do you remember what your first job outside your home would have been?
Yeah, my grandfather, one of my grandfathers lived between De Leon and Dublin. He had a large farm there, so I would go down there in the summertime, probably starting when I was 8 or 9 years old, and work for them all summer, and hoeing peanuts, or hauling hay, or driving a tractor, or whatever. So I learned all that at an early age, and I learned that I needed to get an education. Right, I'd never leave the farm, you know, one of those deals. But it's funny now, you know, that's part of what I love to do, because I have an acreage and I love to drive the tractor. And I don't like to hoe or haul hay, but as long as it's in round bales, I can haul those. But it's funny how that became a part of me, you know, and what I love to do, and what really recharges my batteries so I can go back to my paying job, you know.
So now, in what age do you think that would? You may have said this. What age?
Yeah, I was probably 8 years old, and I can remember working down there for 3 or 4 years until I got old enough to stay here and haul hay and drive a truck. Probably till I was age 14 or 15, because we did that back then. And then we hauled hay, and then my first, what I would call real, you know, 8 to 5 or whatever job was when they started the dam down there. I hired on to H.B. Zachary. Several of us did. Me and Jimmy Tidwell and Pogie Harold Ames hired on down there to work, and we were laborers. And they would dig the footings that dam set on and blast, and you know, then they'd get as much out of it as they could with the backhoe or whatever. Then we'd get in there with the shovels and shovel it out. And then here would come the inspector, and he'd tink on these rocks. If they were hollow, we had to get the jackhammer and dig it out a little deeper. And so I finally got a promotion to an air tool operator. And I was making $160 an hour, and then I got a promotion. I was making $210 an hour. Man, I got in some tall cotton then.
So now, how old were you when you started that?
I was after my senior year in high school.
Okay.
Yeah, I was fixing to go to college, fixing freshman year. Yeah.
So you actually worked on the dam.
I did.
The construction of it prior to it coming in. I want to talk later on.
Yeah, that'd be 1967, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, when they first started it.
So how long did you work on that project?
Just the summer.
The summer.
Yeah. Part of the summer, because we had to. Well, we got out of school, then we had to report to TCU, where I was, you know, played football by like the middle of August or something like that. So I got enough of that jackhammer for sure.
That got you ready for the season.
It got me ready. I tell you what, I was tough. Those guys, when we started practice up there, a lot of the guys just passing out and everything. It didn't bother me. I've been down in the hole, you know, all summer.
You were just proud to be out.
I was glad to be out with some fresh air, you
Yeah.
know. But a funny story, when they would blast, now this is OSHA would just shut anybody down that did this. Of course, we had metal hard hats. We had to wear the metal hard hats, which is a no-no today. But when they'd blast, they'd sound the whistle, and we'd get under these big old track cranes. I mean, the huge cranes with the track on them, We'd crawl under there. That's the only shelter we had, and they'd blast and rocks would rain down for 5 minutes, and you you know not to poke your head out because here comes another rock, so you made plenty of time before the next blast.
Yeah.
But that was totally beyond
That would be a no-no
built
today.
no today. That's right.
Well, tell me about your. You referred to Jerry Don a while ago.
Yeah.
And I think Barry. But
And
just
Barry
tell
is my youngest brother.
me- okay. Just tell me about what it was like growing up with them. I mean, what really memories, or a few of the memories you have just with your brothers.
Yeah, well, Jared On, he's deceased, but he and I were 2 years apart, and then Barry we called him the caboose, or the accident. He's born in '56, he was 6 years younger than Jared On, so 8 years younger than me. And, of course, Jared On and I had to do all the work around there, and Barry got to watch TV, but we say, and so anyway, we give him a hard time, and of course he'd give it right back to us. But Jared On and I, we fight all the time until somebody else come into the picture. Then we'd both fight him. You don't mess with my brother. I might mess with him, but you don't. Yeah. So we were real close for a long, long time. He worked for the bank for, I don't know, 25 years probably before he passed.
Well, so now growing up in your house, I mean, what did y'all? How about holidays? How did you celebrate holidays, birthdays, that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah. Well, we had a big family back in Comanche. My mother's side of the family, especially, we celebrated Christmas and all that. Thanksgivings were huge. I mean, my grandmother Parker, which is my mother's maiden name, they had like 9 kids, and they all had 2 or 3 kids. So when they gathered at her house, and my big daddy, we called him, in Comanche, it was a house full, and we had huge football games out in the front yard because we had all those cousins down there, and it was just a big gathering, a big celebration. But then my grandfather Hodges, Paul Hodges, and his wife there in De Leon, they had, of course, the big farm, and they had a pecan bottom. So starting in my recollection of it, when I was probably 6 years old, every 4th of July they would have what they called like a gospel singing down there. They'd set up a trailer, like a flatbed trailer, and have the Blackwood Brothers Quartet. Elvis Presley was down there, Johnny Horton, Little Jimmy Dickens, all those. I mean, every summer they'd have some big star and big doings, and people would come from all around. I have some articles about that in a magazine somewhere, and I can remember my Uncle Terry, who's 2 years older than me. Our job was to get that park cleaned up. We'd have to pick up pecan limbs, and then we'd have to mow it all. And then my grandfather had a huge, like water tank with spigots on it, and we'd go to town and get ice and put in there, and then haul water and fill that thing up so people would have drinking water. But it was quite a big picnic every 4th of July.
So did you? I mean, or was your mother and our father, were they musically inclined? Did they?
No, not really. No, they like music. My dad, he especially liked it, and they would go to, later on. They would go to all the bluegrass festivals and music festivals and things like that. But of course, I was introduced to it through my wife, Sue Lynn. She was very talented. She played professionally for a little while, and she could play anything with strings on it. She would aggravate me because she just could play it, and I had to struggle with it.
So and we'll talk about this. So you learned to play a guitar?
Yeah, my first instrument was a guitar. Yeah.
So you learned that after you were married?
Well, during college, before I got married, I kind of picked it up because I was hanging around with her, and I thought, oh, that's cool. And I wanted to keep hanging around with her, so I thought, I better learn how to play something.
I want to develop that in a minute.
Yeah, that's right.
So tell me, and just kind of get more of a background, What about of course, you alluded to the fact that you've gone to college, and we'll talk about that some more, but just as far as in your family, background, parents, grandparents, what was the education? What was education expected?
Well,
what was done, or what was available?
Of course, my grandparents, they just maybe had a high school education, but they made it just fine and were very successful. Especially Grandpa Hodges, I was told he had the first brick house, built the first brick house in Comanche County. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it's still standing, and I can remember it back in the early 50s. But anyway, probably the next generation of Parkers and Hodges they're the ones that got college educations. Of all my cousins, there's a couple of doctors in there, and almost all my cousins, with the exception of very few, have like college educations. My brothers had college education, and my dad, he says, "Well, I've got 4 college educations." He had none, but he sent 4 kids through college. He says, and my mother. Yeah. So he said, "I've got 4 degrees." That's what he was always called it. But
so would you just an observation? Would you say that was the college education expected of you, or something that you just decided you needed to do? I mean, was it a combination of expectations and what you felt like needed to be done?
I'll tell you what it was for me. It was knowing that unless I got an education, I'd be hauling hay the rest of my life or something, agrarian or by hand, just labor, which is nothing wrong with that, but that's not what I wanted. And I don't know that I guess it kind of was expected, but more so my own doings. And also the fact that the Vietnam War was raging back then made you stay in school. I mean, because if you didn't, you'd be, had to go to the draft deal and you'd be gone. So by the time I got out of college, the Vietnam War was winding down and they were, sending people home from over there. So I skipped that by staying in school. And I'm not saying that I didn't want to do anything for my country, but I just didn't want to go over there, honestly, if I could help it.
Well, that's. Do you remember the draft?
Oh yeah.
I mean, and you were in the lottery, I guess.
Yes, you remember the lottery?
Yes.
So I remember I was at TC and we were sitting in one guy's dorm room. He had I don't know if was listening to it on the radio, I guess, because none of us had TVs. And one of the trainers there, Jot Smith, they drew number 1 and it was him. I mean, he just like sank. And I was number 54, so I mean, there was a cinch I was going to go before the draft board and all that. Of course, some of them, they were way up there, and I thought, crap. Just my luck.
Well, it's interesting to me how, just from your family background, how, of course, we're going to talk about your education in a minute, just in college, but just the fact that you were motivated by yourself and got encouragement, I guess, from your family.
Yeah, parents, and they thought I should go to college. Everybody expected you to go to college back then, but not everybody did. And it's still not for everybody. You know how that goes. Yeah. So
what about this? So did you go to grade school here in
Granbury? I went to school all the way through Granbury. Graduated in '67. And then went to TCU and got my BBA and graduated in '71. So
let's talk a little bit about just your high school. We'll slip over to college here in a minute. Your high school, just what were you involved in high school?
Yeah, athletics mainly. I mean, now there's all kinds of different programs you can get into, but really back then, if you didn't play sports, you didn't have a sideline, and I love sports anyway. I mean, it was what we did when we went home. We played ball, one sort of another, basketball, baseball, football in the yard, till Mama made us come in, and then we just kept on with it through junior high and then high school. There was a baseball league in the summer, but there wasn't football like there is now, or soccer. There wasn't nobody played soccer here back then, so there wasn't any soccer teams.
So you really started your football career, say,
Seventh grade.
Sandlot.
Yeah,
But then
Sandlot,
when
you
you
bet.
got organized,
Oh,
you started it in junior high, I guess.
Yeah, junior high. Seventh grade was our first organized
Yeah.
football, and I don't know. I never really did keep up with, but I know we didn't lose any games when I was seventh or eighth grade, but I think we might have lost 4 games the whole 6 years I played college or high school ball and junior high.
Okay.
So we had good players, we had good coaches, we had really good teams.
So from the time that you really started, so did you start playing football? I mean, in high school, did you start playing football as a freshman? I mean, in other words, Granbury were a 2A school at that time.
They were 2A.
Okay. So did you start playing football in playing as a freshman? Did you start? Was it something?
Oh, was I a starter?
Yeah.
No, I actually played on the B team a few games, but then I started playing on the varsity, and I subbed in at linebacker and running back, and then when I was a sophomore, I was a starter. Of course, sophomore, junior, senior, I started those 3 years, running back, and then safety, or they kind of had a hybrid safety. I cheated up on closer to the line, you know. It was easier for me not to cover those fast guys. Too fast for me.
Well, so now tell me, and I know being just around here, tell me about the 1966.
Yeah, it
team.
Was crazy. I mean, looking back, and of course, I look back a lot at it. We had so much talent on that team, but we didn't have a lot of depth. I mean, our starting 11 guys were as good as anybody in the state. Obviously, we won 14 games in a row, then got beat in the finals. But I mean, we rolled over a lot of people by 40 or 50, 60 points. You know, lots of people. And the guys that I played with, the seniors, there were 6 seniors on that team, and all of them got scholarships at in one division or another. 2 of us got scholarship at D1s, and then the D2s got scholarships at different schools. And then the juniors in that year, there was 2 or 3 of those that got D1 scholarships. Sophomores 1 or 2, and then freshmen 1 or 2. So that, I mean, yeah, to tell you how talented. Yeah. And then we had some big guys, we had some fast guys, and they all loved to rough it up. They were the rougher it got, the better some of them liked it, you know. And some of the funniest stories have come from my days in high school football of.
What is there any of those that would be
retaliation? You know?
So, I mean, the guys that you played with, are there still some of them that are around?
Oh yeah, a couple of them are deceased. Harold Ames, we called him Pogie. He played tackle, and he was back in that day. He weighed about 230, and that was big, a big guy back in that day. And then George Raines, who is Lita Andrews' little brother, and Shirley Hayward's little brother. He got killed in a car wreck, but he was all state, and he played running back and safety, and he was an amazing athlete. So those 2 guys, are deceased, but they were really good players. And then Larry Stewart's still in town. He played guard here. Dwayne Wilson lives in Goldthwaite. Jimmy Tidwell was an all-state quarterback. He lives in Buena Vista, Colorado. So, and Herman Mitchell still lives here, and he was a wide receiver. So those were the 6 seniors. But I guess some of the most notable ones, Tom Durant, we called him Tommy Durant back then. He owns all the classic dealerships. If you see all classic Chevrolet, GMC, whatever, he owns all that, and he has done amazingly well. But he still comes around. He's still just the same old guy. So a lot of the guys that I played with are very successful. I mean, I guess they just were good at sports, and they knew how to make things happen. They knew how to work hard at it, and that's what it takes to be successful in anything, really.
So do you guys still get together? I mean,
We
periodically?
do. Sometimes, not annually, but yeah, somebody will call up and say, hey, we need to get together. But I see some of them, almost not daily, but monthly, or something. So,
So
yeah,
what
we
was
did.
that like going from Granbury to
Yeah.
playing the Southwest Conference?
The old Southwest Conference. So it was tough. I mean, I recall that I always told people, said when you're in high school, you might get hit by one guy, kind of hard if you carried the ball. But when you're in college, you better hang on. That's going to be three of them, just nail you, And that was the big difference for me. That and plus the speed of the game. It just was like warp speed, and I was able to cope with it and actually excel pretty well at it. But the size of the game too. I mean, like for instance, we played like when at TCU. Besides playing Texas and Arkansas and A&M and all the Tech and all those in the Southwest Conference, our non-conference games were like Wisconsin, Purdue, Miami, Ohio State, and if you had that schedule today, people say, "Oh shoot, you're gonna get beat up," and we did too. We got beat up pretty well. We played with Purdue and Wisconsin really well, and Miami really well, but Ohio State just ran all over us. And that was when they had the national championship team back in, I think that was '69 or '8. I don't remember, but. And one of the big differences was the size of the crowd. Granbury, there might have been a couple of thousand people at some of the playoff games, but when you have 85,000 and they're screaming and throwing stuff out of the stands, the first thing you remember, keep your helmet on and do not look up.
So was that pretty? I guess, and you mentioned the crowd as starting out at TCU, having come from Granbury. I guess that was a pretty remarkable sight.
It was amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's like good night. You walk on that field and the fields, also because they have a lot of artificial turf back then. But then, when I was a freshman, we went down to A&M and played our first college game at A&M, which we won, by the way. Sorry, Aggies, but those guys can grow some grass. I never will forget how nice that field was there in Kyle Field with a grass field. It was amazing. It's like perfect, So, just things you remember,
Yeah. So was that had there been any? I mean, you mentioned several a while ago that on that '66 team that secured scholarships.
Yes.
Prior to the time that you graduated and got the scholarships that were yours and the other team, had that been something that had been accomplished here?
Well, I don't really think so. There might have been 2 or 3, which would have been 4 or 5 years younger than or older than me. Jack Powell, I'm not sure if he got a scholarship, and then Ray Reed, he was a good player, and I'm not sure about some of that group. Jerry Carswell, they probably did, especially Carswell. I mean, he was fast. I think he ran track at like ACC back then, I think. But yeah, there was a few athletes that got scholarships for sure. Mm-hmm.
But that 1966 and the scholarships that came out of that really
it was just crazy.
Yeah,
it was unheard of. Yeah.
Probably hasn't been repeated here.
No, Johnny Perkins, of course, he's a stud athlete that, of course, went on to play for the Giants, but he's probably the biggest name after us, I guess. But yeah, it was kind of an anomaly, that many good players got together at one point for such a small area. It's like, I don't know how that happened, it just did. But yeah.
Well, it is pretty amazing when you consider. Now, tell me, I'm looking at some newspaper articles. Tell me about the Abe Martin Award.
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to get the Abe Martin Award when I was a senior, and it's like, I don't like to talk about myself winning awards, but I guess it was for more leadership. And then, of course, athletic accomplishments during that season. So I was fortunate enough to get that. Abe Martin was head coach for TCU for many years and then athletic director. He was athletic director when I was there. So that's what who that award was named after.
So now, what year would you say that was? What year?
70, I think, is when I got that award.
Okay, so you would have been
Well, that was after my junior playing year, senior college year, because I was redshirted one year. I got a knee injury and redshirted, so that was my senior year, because that's the last year I played, yeah.
Now, what about, I also saw that you were an All-Southwest Conference, on the All-Southwest Conference academic team.
Yeah, pretty smart. I guess, I don't know. I don't know how I did that. But I mean, it's just, I think I made a 3.2 out of 4, which, I guess if you consider that every day we had to work out, I mean, even in the off season, we went down there and lifted weights and stuff. So it's like kind of having a part-time job. But then they made available tutors and stuff, which made it easier for them, easier for us. And then I did fairly well playing, I had a couple of really good games, and I started almost every game, or at least played in every game when I was a senior especially. But I started out, when I was a junior, I played defense, strong safety and free safety. And then they moved me back to offense when I was a senior, and that's what I really liked. I didn't like the defense because those guys were too fast. That ball sails over your head, and you're going, oh my gosh, we're in trouble now. Stay deep. So I liked the offense better, and I did better playing that offense, yeah. That's where I got the recognition.
Yeah. So now I know you don't like to talk about yourself, but were there any other awards at TCU that as a result of your playing at TCU?
Well, I did get I think 2 games I got offensive back for those games. They would honor a most valuable offensive back and defensive back and lineman and all that. And I got 2 or 3 games, I believe I got offensive back of the game. So they had a little plaque and all that with me on there, and gave that award to me. So I think A&M and maybe Wisconsin and maybe Purdue. I don't know, maybe those 3 games. Oh no, Texas Tech. I'm sorry, Texas Tech, A&M, and Wisconsin. Yeah.
Well, so what would you? I mean, in your, let's say, career at TCU, what do you think about did you make friendships that you still have today?
Oh, yeah.
Players on the TCU team that you
absolutely. Played? I mean, you become kind of blood brothers, or we did. I mean, because it was rough. I mean, it was tough practicing, and then we had 3-a-days when I was a freshman, which that was unheard of back then. And you didn't eat. You went and tried to catch a few more Z's in the rack, we called it. Yeah. So slept in between practices, and then I ate some. But the guys that we get together once a year, still really twice a year. But a group of us go down to Marquez, where a guy has a farm down there, and we go down there, and our yards per carry go up every year, and our number of victories go up every year as the stories get larger. So we do that, and we all, there's 3 of us have homes in Ruidosa, and that's a small group of us go out there every year and spend 3 or 4 days. So and they're really successful too. It's amazing how successful those guys are. I don't know, I just believe there's some correlation between the drive that athletics give you, mm-hmm. and then and how you can carry that over into your professional career. I mean, I just believe that there's something connected there, because I see it happen too often, so I think it's important.
Yeah, not theoretical for you, it's an observation.
It's definitely an observation. Yeah. I mean, I've got examples every direction you look with those guys especially.
Well, before we move on to the next area, is there anything else? I mean, now I did note, just in looking at stuff, and one thing that you did not mention from high school was that you were the president of student council and Mr. Granbury High School. Was that correct?
Well, yeah.
Was that your senior year, or was that in?
I think I was. Well, that was senior year, yeah. So you got to remember there were 54 people in my graduating class, and probably not over 300 in the whole high school. So I mean, the odds are kind of high that you're going to have to be somebody or do something. You know, that's all that I have to say about that. As Forrest Gump would say.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what you did after you graduated. Well, I don't we're going to cover some of this, but just after you graduated, and I think you said you got a BBA.
Yeah, in finance, with concentration in finance. I mean, instead of a minor, they called it a concentration. Yeah, from TCU. And so I honestly, in 1967, I mean, there were hardly any jobs. I mean, I remember that they had a job fair or something, but hardly anybody showed up who were employers. I mean, a lot of people in Fort Worth back then worked at they called it Convair, which is now Lockheed, you know, or Bell Helicopter, but I didn't want to do that. I mean, I had an education. I wanted to do something with it. But there wasn't anything showing up, so my dad was in the bank one day in downtown Granbury and talked to Mr. Luton and said, "Hey, what's James going to do when he graduates?" Dad said, "I don't know," and he doesn't know. He said, "Well, tell him to come see me." So anyway, that's how I went to see Mr. Luton. I got hired at First National Bank, and I've been there ever since. It's crazy.
Okay, so that was First National Bank was your first job.
Yes.
Out of
college. Yeah, for sure. And
so now, before we go down that road, I really want to kind of talk about that. But tell me about how you and Sue Lynn got together. And I don't want to jump ahead, but just tell me about that.
She was a year behind me in school in Granbury, and I mean, we just rocked along. I never did really notice her until I was I guess a junior. She was a sophomore, and she was big into running barrels on her horse, and she liked riding horses, and she still did until the day she died. But yeah, so I was at the fairgrounds, and she was running barrels up there, and I asked her if I could take her home. She said, "Well, I guess so." So anyway, her dad took her horse home, and I took her home, and that's how we got started right there. But I don't know why all of a sudden I noticed her, and I never did before. But I guess because I got turned down by so many women. Because back then, I mean, the ones in our class were like your sister, you know. You just didn't want to date them. They were like your sister, you know. You knew all about them and everything because there were so few of us. But yeah, so Sue Lynn and I were.
So you dated throughout high school?
Oh yeah, we got married when I was a junior in college, and she was working in Fort Worth, and she tells everybody she supported me through college, and she sure did. But we lived in some apartments there, and the school, what you did if you didn't live in the dorm back then and were on scholarship, I think you got like $100 a month for rent or something, and I think our rent was $130 or something for, I think, a 1-bedroom apartment. Anyway, so we did fine.
Just let me get clear in my mind. So what year would that have been?
We got married in 1969, December 27th, 1969. So, and then I graduated in 71, so that'd be a year and a half. And she was pregnant with our first son, which kind of put the pressure on me to get a job, you know. So, yeah, that's when Mr. Luton showed up. But she was an amazing woman. She could play anything with strings. She was so smart and crafty. We have a bunch of gourds that she carved, and I mean, they're amazing. I was looking at some of them the other day, but she would get bored with it. You know, she was a typical art type person. They get bored with things start to bore them, and they go on to the next thing. So she would, you know, go to crocheting or knitting, and then she'd paint, and then she'd do some rocks, and then she'd do some gourds. You know, she was just all over the place. But
so she just had an artistic bent.
She did.
And that was manifested also. Tell me about her musical talent.
Yeah, well, she started her musical. Her mother and daddy were real talented too, and they played all the time, and so she was exposed to that. But the story is, and she told me this herself, that they took her to, they had a sister that lived in Denver, and there was this company that made banjos up in the mountains there at Boulder, Colorado. They bought a banjo for her, and she learned to play it riding back in the back seat from Denver, Colorado. She learned to play a few songs.
So how old would she have been?
She would have been like a probably a freshman in high school, maybe 8th grade, something like that. She was really young as far as that goes, but she learned to pick it. Of course, her mother and daddy just encouraged her, and they picked with her, and then first thing you know, there was other people coming around, and they would have big jams in their yard and everything. And then Sue Lynn learned to play bass fiddle. I mean, just all by ear. Couldn't read a lick of music. Well, she might have read some music, but not hardly.
But
any.
no formal training?
No, none. She and she could sit down at the piano. She did have, piano lessons for a while, but she said the teacher would whack her hands because she'd quit looking at the music and start playing by ear. And she said, I had enough of that. So she quit. Well, she until the day she died, she could sit down at the piano and just play something by ear, and most of it was old religious songs, and stuff, and but she could play like the rinky-tink style and all that stuff. It was crazy. And
so was that I wanted to develop this, that was a big deal in her family then?
Yes.
Her parents, you said, were both musically talented. So did they travel around, or did they, by that I mean, what did that entail?
Well, mostly just going to other people's houses that played, and there was a couple of local people. There was Nolan Richardson, and then they had some friends over around Rendon over there, and they'd go over there, and they'd go to Cleburne, and just around, and just sit in the front yard or in the living room, depending on the weather. And also, there at Fall Creek, there was and it's burned down since, but an old church building. They had once a month, they had a picking and grinning up there on a Saturday night. They had one up here at between here and Weatherford, up here. I mean, all around they'd have, back in that day, it was singings and musicals and stuff, and they'd go to a lot of that.
So what period would that have been?
That would have been the 50s into the late, I'd say mid 50s into the 1970s probably, yeah.
So that would have meant that just music was a big deal in this this community, Granbury, and the surrounding communities.
Rural communities especially. Because
they have, I guess they had included in that, they would have gospel singing at churches and stuff.
Yes, for sure. They'd have musical family, and you see a lot of musical families nowadays that have become successful groups because they started in church, singing in church, and really talented, and really,
Now, was Sue Lynn, did she sing too?
Yeah, she could sing too. She sang along.
And her parents, they did.
Her mother loved to sing. Oh yeah, man, she could sing those old songs,
What about siblings? Did Sue Lynn have?
She had 3 sisters. 2 of them are deceased. One, and Sue Lynn got it too. She got the childhood polio back in the 50s. Remember there was a big polio epidemic. Her sister died, but Sue Lynn, it affected her legs, and it never did get in her lungs, and so she survived that. And then she's got her oldest sister died probably 20 years ago, and then she's got a living sister that lives in Chicago area up there. So she's got one sibling.
Were they all musically inclined, or was that right?
None of them. I mean, they couldn't. Honestly, couldn't carry a tune if they had to. But I don't know. Sue Lynn just got it all.
Yeah,
for
that's
sure.
interesting.
Yeah, I know. Usually it's the whole group,
Yeah. So what about your interest in music? I mean, tell me about.
Well, mainly it came because of her. I had to keep up with her, but we were always exposed to it. Just like I said, we had a big 4th of July gathering down at De Leon, and I always liked going down there and listening to those people. I had to go down there and work and clean it up, but I started picking up a guitar, and I had me a book that showed where to put your fingers, for this and that, and then the way I really learned to play was by listening to albums. Put an old 78 RPM, or I guess it's 33s, and listen to like Hank Williams and some of those old ones, because they were like 3 chords, and you could just play along with them, you know. So you tune your guitar to the same, you know, same as theirs, and it just play right along with them. So that's kind of how I learned to play some of that stuff. And then I got the nerve up to sit with them when they play in the yard or in the house and everything. Try to keep up with them. Boy, some of it I could not, though. Still can't.
Well, it's interesting that you had the opportunity to and the desire to learn it, and Sue Lynn had the talent, natural talent, you know.
Yeah, she did.
So tell me, you mentioned, we'll just step back a minute. Now, you and Sue Lynn, where did y'all live when you first married then?
We lived in Fort Worth because I was still in college and she was working. We lived on Rogers Road there. And then when I graduated, there was an optometrist in Fort Worth named Mason Main. And he has a big ranch out here, M&M Ranch out at Waples. And so I don't remember how I ran into him, but I was looking for a place to live, and he said, well, I've got a house that's going to be vacant. So we moved into it, and I did some work for him out there on the ranch, and then we finally bought a house in '74, I think, and moved off of there. Yeah.
So tell me about your family. Your and Sue Lynn's, y'all.
Okay. So yeah, we had our first baby child, son, in 1971, and that's James Hodges. He went to, of course, Granbury High School, and he was athletically and musically inclined. And all our kids are. I mean, they just got that from her. Jason, he played guitar and mandolin and bass fiddle, and he can play a dobro a little bit. He can pick it up and play it. Justin, the middle son, he was born in '75, and he can play banjo, guitar, mandolin. And then Jody, our daughter, she was born in '79, and she played the fiddle, and she can play fiddle pretty well. And I've never seen her play the guitar, but I'm sure she can. But anyway, Jason, the oldest, he's a landscape architect. He lives down at Pecan Plantation. They just moved from Lubbock, and he does really well. If you've been to Lubbock, to the campus up there on Texas Tech, all the landscape design and everything, he's done all of that. He used to work for them. Now he contracts through them to do the design. So he does all that. Justin is an RN, and he worked for Cleveland Fire Department for many years. But then he went back to school and got his RN, and he works in around the Arlington area. And then Cook's Children, he works for Cook's Children. Jody's an RN as well, my daughter, and she works for Harris and works either in Stephenville, Fort Worth, or Arlington. So she lives at Toller and has 5 kids, and they keep me busy going to games and church and everything. They just something all the time going on with them. So that's
so how many grandkids do you have then?
12. Excuse me, and 2 greats. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, we had them all out this last Saturday. Every one of them came out, and it was a great gathering, a big household.
Now, where's Justin? You may have said
he lives in Arlington.
He lives in Arlington.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you got everybody then just pretty much around close.
Nobody way off. Yeah, and that's a blessing.
That is.
Or a curse, depending how you want to look.
Depending how long they've been at the house.
That's right. Aren't y'all ready to go home yet?
Love to see them come. Love to see them go.
Yes, that's right. My grandfather used to say he'd get up out of his chair about 9 o'clock, and he'd say, "You boys can stay up all night if you want to, but I'm going to bed." And I mean, he would head to the bedroom, and that was our signal to pipe it down. You know.
You kind of understand that now, is that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I'm living it now.
So just give me, before we move on, just give me your quick assessment of Sue Lynn as a mother and grandmother.
She was amazing in every sense of the word. I mean, boy, you didn't mess with her grands, you know. They were her pride and joy, and there wasn't any limit to her love for them or her willingness to do anything, whatever it took for any of them. She was pretty stern with them. She'd correct them just as quick as she'd praise them, you know. And but she always had philosophy for them, you know. She philosophized with them, you know, tell them how they should live their lives and all this. And she was big about witnessing to them about, you need to get in church, you know, you need to do this, you need to do that about church. So she was a big witness to them, and a lot more than I was. I'll tell you that. So she had one of the first things she'd ask people when she'd meet them was, "Well, where do y'all go to church?" You know, and she was just that way. And I'm afraid I don't do that. I wish I did a little more, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, she was amazing at that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just the way she was.
Yeah.
So I just would anticipate your anticipation that your grandchildren will probably have very fond memories of their grandmother.
Indeed, they do. They sure do.
That's good that you know everybody's close. Now, James, let's shift. I want to talk about First National Bank and your career there. I want to kind of explore something about Mr. Luton.
Yeah, that's an easy one because, you know, it's the only job I ever had. Not because I didn't have other offers, but I could see. I mean, the Lutons first of all, and the owners, Jay Caraway. He's another owner of the bank. They are so hands off. I mean, you know this because we've talked about it before, but they're so hands off with me. And maybe to a fault sometimes, but they let me, and I'm the CEO, they let me run the show, and they see the results, and they don't ever question what I do. And it's just like good, but scary, you know, because you're, okay, going down this path the right way or not, you know. And of course, I have so many smart people work for me, it's just insane. But when I hired on, our bank was like $5 million in total assets, $5 million, and I mean we were barely making any money because I mean you take $5 million, how much money can you make on there? We had like maybe 15 employees, and nobody made any money. Nobody in town made any money. I tell my children, I said that was BM. They said, "What's that?" I said that's before money. Nobody had any, nobody made any, you know. So and now it's just falls from the sky, you know. It's just crazy, but.
So what you started out doing when you
I was hired. I worked for a CPA there who was auditing the books for like the first 2 weeks, and then when he got through with his audit, I took over. I sat in the teller window, and then I started doing some of the books. Everything was done by hand. I mean, you had to record every entry that was made to general ledger, handwritten, you know, in this book called the Boston Ledger, and then assets on one side and liabilities on the other, and it all had the balance at the bottom. So you hand wrote it in there, so you made sure it was right before you started handwriting. And we posted books by hand. I mean, they had a ledger sheet, and they put in this machine and put in the beginning balance, and then debits or checks and deposits. And anyway, we had like 4 machines that we kept those books on. So it was all done by hand. Checks were sorted by hand, I mean alphabetized, and there was no account numbers at all by alphabet back then. It was very labor intense, and Mr. Swenson, who kind of tutored me and showed me how to do the general ledger and all that stuff, he taught me how to do all that stuff. He was a stickler. I mean, if you didn't balance, you would stay there until you did, so you learned pretty quick to watch it as you went along. And then when the dam went in '69, you know, and was impounded, people started moving down here. We started growing. So I guess the rest is history. I mean, now, 50 years later, we're $900 million and 160 employees and 7 or 8 locations. I lose count sometimes. So it's just incredible. And it's not because of what I did, it's what the community did, what the people around me did. But
so let me ask you this: so you when you first came to work, you really just started out at the ground level. So tell me just how. I know the bank has obviously progressed, but what about your positions? What are you doing?
Mr. Swenson decided he would retire in about 2 or 3 years after I went to work, which was almost too quick. So I was promoted to vice president and cashier, and I mean that happened real fast. And so I was responsible for all the general ledger and all the call reporting and the tax preparations and the audits and all that. And I had to learn all that stuff a lot by hand. But and I did that for probably 30 years. And then John Henry stepped down as president. I became president and CEO, what, 7 or 8 years ago? I don't, time flies, but, and that's where I am today as president and CEO. So it's,
And that's and I think you said this, but you've been there then 50 years now, or 51?
52 years.
52 years.
In July, yeah. This is, 52 in July the 1st.
Well,
I know, but I'm not going to make 53.
now tell me, just now of course, you graduated high school here. We've covered that, and so the Lutons were here. So you knew Mr. Luton, or knew of him.
I mean, I never had any dealings with him before he hired me. But of course, John Henry, his son, is a grade below. He was in Sue Lynn's grade in school, so I knew him. And Doris, his wife, was an English teacher in high school. So, yeah, we knew everybody, and they knew us. And so, but as time went on, he was such a fun guy. I mean, when it came to having fun, he liked to have fun, and we would go play golf and just rib each other and everything. He liked interaction. He liked for all us guys to stop by his house in the afternoons or go play golf one afternoon or on a Saturday or something. So he was a very social kind of guy that way, and but he was so much fun. He was just
so. Do you think his attitude is about banking? Does it permeate the business First National today?
Oh yes, through me and John Henry and Jake Caraway. I mean, Mr. Luton, if you didn't do it right and by the book and straight up, you weren't going to be around long. I mean, if you took shortcuts or if you tried to cheat at anything, you were gone. He just wouldn't tolerate it. I mean, he was straight as an arrow that way. That's for sure. And it rubbed off. I mean, it's like, boy, it's sure easier to get along with the next exam if you know everything is done right. I mean, you don't throw it a chance. You just make sure it's done. And that came from him. Yeah.
So he looked at, now I don't want to put words in your mouth. If this is not right, you need to tell me it's not right. Did he kind of look at the bank employees as more like a kind of a family or an extended family?
He did. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, like I say, he'd tell us, you boys stop by the house after work. We'll sit around we'd sit around the kitchen table, 4 or 5 of us, and have a drink and just talk about things, and that's what he liked to do. And once a year we'd go to the Golden Gloves over there in Fort. He loved to go to the Golden Gloves. We'd always have to go by Angelo's Barbecue on the way and get a pound of ribs and a schooner of beer, and then going up to the Golden Gloves. So we did a lot of things with him, and he really thought it was important for us to get together and talk out of school, different things. So and we still continue that today. I mean, I have 5 or 6, I lose count, 6 I guess now, senior VPs, and we can get together periodically, not socially, but at the bank and have meetings and just kick around things, and I point out things that I would like for them to do and everything. So communication is a big deal, and so many times we lose communication, and I think it hurts us because anybody can get off track.
Yeah.
But if you're in my position, it's my job to keep people on track. And sometimes I let it go too long before I reel them back in. And but Mr. Luton taught us that too. Yeah.
You just kind of developed what he was. How he
tried to
instructed you. It's kind of your style has developed from that.
I think so. Yeah. Hands off until you need to be hands on.
I had mentioned in just some preliminary stuff, I had read recently a oral history that was done by, it was of Mary Lou Watkins is what it was, and Mary Lou had in her oral history said that there were two, and of course we're going to assume anybody that's listening to this knows who Mary Lou Watkins was, but she said that there were two times he felt like she didn't really get her way here. One had to do with something unrelated to Mr. Luton, but she said the other one was when Mr. Luton won out and got to tear down the building behind the bank.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't know whether that would be something that you remembered when they tore the building down. That's now the parking lot there.
Yeah.
Do you remember? Do you remember anything about that?
Well, I don't remember the politics behind it.
Yeah.
But I remember that old building being there, and it was a wreck. I mean, it was just a shell, really. But we needed that space because at the time our drive-through went through the middle of the bank, or the east end of the bank there, and then circled back around. So we needed that room back there. But I think the deal was, Mr. Luton agreed to use the rock that came out of that room to farm that drive-through. And some of that rock is still down there in our parking lot behind our motor bank that lines the parking lot. That rock came out of that building. And the last thing I remember that building being used for was the cleaners. I mean, there was cleaners in there, but it got into ill repair, and it was taking a ton of money to restore it. And it's like, even then, I don't know the historical significance of it, if it was that great. But yeah, she didn't want anything disturbed.
Yeah, well, and that's Mary Lou, and she in this oral history, I should have let you read it. She said that she felt like she always had a good relationship with Mr. Luton. It's just there was one time that she lost.
Right. Right.
When economics prevailed over preservation.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's
well, I mean, economics in the bigger picture of the.
Well, and I will tell you, and this may be where you're going later on, but the bank. It was one of the few surviving businesses over time there on the square. So it was like the hub of anything that happened. And we saw businesses come, businesses go, and nothing really happened concretely to restore the square until, the early 70s probably. So the bank had a lot of swag, I guess. It had a lot of influence, and Mr. Luton knew that because he learned it from Mr. Zweifel, his father-in-law, and then he just carried it on through. So what was good for the bank was usually good for downtown, if you know what I mean.
Well, let's talk about that just real quick, but tell me just a little bit about the history of the bank in this sense, when it was established, and just a little background.
Yeah, so 1887, I believe, it became a national chartered bank. Before then, it was a private bank. Traylor and Cogdill, those two guys that started it as a private bank, and they chartered it, and then it just, I don't know, probably stayed the same size for 100 years or more. But we did absorb a couple of banks that failed in the downtown. There were a couple of other banks downtown, and we absorbed City National, and I don't remember the other one, Granbury National maybe. Anyway, we absorbed those during the Depression and survived. And then, like I started out a while ago, we stayed the same size all the way till 1970 probably, and started growing some. Yeah. So, and then this warp speed with computers and all the data processing and the sorters and everything, and it's just been one change right after the other. I guess that's why I could stay there 51, nearly 52 years and not get bored, because it's never been the same. I mean, things have changed every 2 or 3 years. Something changes, so you got to stay ahead of it or you get run over,
So what would you say, just in light of the things that you've discussed there about the bank, what do you think the greatest accomplishments of the First National would be, just over the years of your involvement? Just the transition from the time you got there to where it is today.
Yeah. Well, of course, I can remember Mr. Luton catching a lot of flack because when they put the bypass in, bypass the square, everybody thought the square was going to die, and I guess it kind of made it slow down a little bit. We were criticized for not moving out there, moving our main office out there and getting off the square. Well, now look at it, what a great decision to make our hub, the executive offices and all that, right on the square. Because if you've been to Granbury, you've been around the square and you've been walked right by our bank. You've seen it. We've tried to keep a good presence there, and a good looking, window that they can look through. So early on, he was criticized for that, but it sure paid off. And as time went on, the branch banking was legalized. You could branch within your county, and so we did that. We started with the 377 branch, and this was all Mr. Luton's doing back then, and then 144 in Acton and Toller and Pecan, and so anyway, and then we branched into Cleveland when it became legal to, a long time after it became legal to branch on out of your county. So we've been able to parlay, I guess, and make it convenient for customers, because a lot of our customers have their own bank. It's like, 144 is my bank, our branch out there. Or Acton's my bank. They may not have ever been downtown, but they've been to their branches, and that's where they go for their services. So I don't know. I always say luck beats good, and I just consider us being lucky, but maybe we are good. I don't know.
Well, the decision to stay downtown certainly sounds like a big...
Turned out to be a home run.
Yeah, big
decision. Yeah. And of course, the stability of ownership all those years.
Yeah.
Every bank that's come to town has changed owners 2 or 3 times, and we've never changed owners. Every time one of them changed owners, we get a herd of people coming to move into our bank, and because they see the stability, and that's what they like. They don't want to change account numbers or change, bank names and all that. People are still, even though, they might be computer literate, they still like a little stability about them and about their finances, for sure.
Well, let me step back just a minute. Now, when did Mr. Luton retire? Just doesn't have to be exact, but just approximately.
Yeah, it would have been in probably late 70s, early 80s. And I'm totally guessing on that. Yeah. And he never did really totally retire. He handed over the reins as president to John Henry, his son, and then he stayed on as chairman of the board until he became ill. His health became ill, and he got ill. His health wouldn't let him, come in and go to the board meetings and stuff. So he died shortly after. But thinking back and seeing how he kind of turned the reins over to guys in their 20s, John Henry and me, we were 20 something. It's like, I don't know that I would do that today. I wouldn't do it, period. And for him to do that, it was like, wow. He must have had a lot of faith in us, or just like to roll those dice. I don't know, but to me, it would scare me to death to think about that.
Well, maybe he could see something in you that you couldn't see in yourself.
I guess so, because it's scary thinking about it.
Well, is there anything, just talking about, let me ask you, I've got a question here. I just have, what is your general assessment of Mr. Luton? Just a general, just your general, I guess that's right, just a general assessment.
Well, I've already touched on some of it. He was a fun guy, but he was, you wanted to do it right. And if you didn't do it right, you would hear about it from him. He could chew your tail out like nobody else's business. And then by the time you thought he was through chewing, he would start over and give you some more of it. So it's like, whoa, let's do this right, boys, because you do not want to get that tail eaten. It was severe. But he was really fun, and just a straight guy. And his wife, Doris, she was really involved in the community as well, in the Opera House and all that. She was an amazing woman, and an English teacher in high school. So the whole family was just top notch for sure. I mean, and you wouldn't know that they had a dime, and he owned, a fourth of the bank probably, but you wouldn't have known it by his lifestyle or by the way he treated people or anything. No, you wouldn't know it at all. So, yeah, that was impressive to me too.
It is interesting. Now, James, I mentioned to you before we started that this Renaissance era of that the History Center is going to tell, and really involves, and we've talked about it some.
Mm-hmm.
It involves the changes that started taking place in this community with two events, and that's the dam and then the restoration of the Opera House. You alluded to the fact that you had worked when Lake Granbury Dam was under construction, so
Yep.
you obviously took part in that. So, do you have memories of the events leading up to the dam? By that I mean, do you have any recollection of what the discussions were in the community? Did you hear about that, or did it just more or less happened and you got a job?
Well, yeah, I really wanted, because I was in high school, junior high, when they started talking about it, and I didn't really know much about it. Other than, like you say, I got a job out of it for one summer. I became an air tool operator. I made $2.10 an hour, and boy, that was big money back then. I'm glad it didn't last longer than it did, because it was hard work. But I remember them damming that up down there where they could build a dam and divert the river around there. And I guess they were lucky they didn't have any floods during that construction period. But I was in school when they closed it down in Fort Worth. When they finally closed the gates, and Dad said it came a rise upstream. Somebody has some rain out there at Seymour, around their post, or where the Brazos starts up there. He said the lake filled up almost overnight. So I mean, it didn't take long for it to get filled up, and so they didn't have time to push the trees down. So that's why you still see a lot of the trees poking up, because it filled up too fast. That's what I was told. Whether that's true or not, I don't know.
Now, so you were away in school when it actually when the lake actually filled. Now, as far as the impact of the addition of Lake Granbury with the dam, how, and of course you've talked about it some, just being at First Nation, but how just would you say that you and your family were impacted by the addition of Lake Granbury?
Well, it created more opportunities for employment here, for sure. I mean, a lot of people started moving to the area because the developments around the lake kind of started, when it filled up, and Dacardova being one of the first ones, and then up towards Oak Trail Shores and up there being a big one as well. And people started moving, so that kind of boosted the economy, boosted the stores that were still open, and then I guess the national chains started moving in. We got a Buddy's, supermarket, and then the big one was when Walmart moved in on the bypass out there. So, as Alan Jackson would say, it killed the little guy, when that happened, for sure.
So what about what did you brought up there? What did the square look like?
Yeah.
Prior to, say, the dam going in.
Yeah, or the bypass. The bypass changed the look of the square more than anything. But we had, all your shopping was done on the square. There were no other stores outside of Granbury except just the square. Maybe a minnow store down there. Vera Parker had a minnow shop, and you could bait shop down here, and you could buy minnows from her. But anyway, there was Williams Dry Goods and Collins Department Store, and that's where you could buy your clothes if you didn't want to go to Fort Worth. The Leonard's Department Store. We bought our straw hats there, that we wore in the summer, and work boots and Levi's. Cherry Drug was there. Thompson's Hardware was over there, where everybody got all their parts and everything for plumbing or anything. Dub's place, got all your tires fixed, and then on the corner up there, well, anyway, it was Cunningham's filling station, and filled up and got you. They filled your gas up and clean your windshield, check your tires, check your oil, full service. Man, what a change! I haven't checked the oil in the car in so long. If it quits, it quits. If the light doesn't come on, I'm sunk, you know. But yeah, they used to check it all, you know. And that was what was around the square back then. There was our bank, and then a couple of restaurants, and then the nut house. They actually there were actually rooms you could rent up there. There were people who came and worked on the dam that rented rooms at the nut house. The only hotel was the Brazos Motel down there where the barbecue place is down here now. And it was the Brazos Motel, and it was just a little, probably had 8 or 9 rooms, you know. But I went to school with the people that owned it. Their parents owned it, you know, so everything was local.
Yeah, it was pretty limited. So what was it like growing up for, I'd say, entertainment? Once
Well,
you start, I mean, as far as once you could drive. I mean,
some of it I can't tell.
well, let's don't go there then.
I could plead the fifth, you know.
Go ahead.
Well, of course, a lot of our activities centered around the river. We would, our favorite thing to do was hire up some inner tubes, and Mom would take us to the Fairview Bridge, we called it, which was the 51 bridge across the river then, and we would float all the way around into town, and it would take all day long, and then we'd come back burnt crisp to crisp, you know, and mosquito bit and chigger bit and everything. But that's what we did. We loved it, and we'd do that once a week or so, and then we'd go down the river. We would dig high jump and pole vault pits down there. You know, we'd cut willows and we'd have a pole vaulting pit and got a pole. And that's a wonder we didn't impale ourselves. But we would leave in the mornings and not come home till dark. No cell phones, no nothing. And it's like, man, it's a different life today, different world today. And I mean, you wouldn't let your kids do that for anything if you were a responsible parent, but that's what everybody did. I mean, and you couldn't get, I mean, you could get in trouble, but they would know it before you got home if you were too ornery. So that it revolved around the river, and anyway, everybody knew everybody in town, and knew if their dog bit or not, you know, usually. So it was just real small community for sure. So
now in the
when you got old enough to date, though, you the big deal was, you get to take a car to the Brad's Drive-In, you know. When you were senior, you got to sit on the back row with your dates, you know. And the little ones had to sit on the front rows.
the small things. Right?
Oh yeah, just small things you remember.
Well, who do you remember that was, well, let's talk about the Opera House restoration. Mm-hmm. It was opened on June 19th, 1975, so the lead up to that, when the actual restoration started, I say it was in 74. Does that started around that sound right?
I guess, you know, I wasn't too involved with that. I know Mrs. Luton was. She was a big supporter of the Opera House, and Mrs. Crawford, which was her sister, and they were both Mr. Weiffel's daughters. So they were really involved with it, and I can't think of the lady's name. Anyway, they were always struggling to raise enough money to get it done, you know, and but I know the Lutons and Miss Crawford, they gave quite a bit of money and a lot of time to do it, so I don't remember a whole lot about it, though, honestly.
I mean, I guess would it be safe to say you had your head down working, but
I did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We had a house full of kids and very little money, so I had to stay home and do what I could to help Sue Lynn.
You weren't as worried about the restoration as really
no, I really wasn't.
You could observe that it was happening.
Yeah. I'm not a very artsy person.
and this is a good. Is there a former store or entity that you miss most about the modern square? About what it is today from what it was.
Some of the things that were okay. So if present day Babes, across from there is that building that has real estate and the taco place in there. That was built as a bowling alley. They had like 5 or 6 lanes in there, maybe 4 lanes, and so my brother Jordan and I, my mother, to get us out of the house, like she sent us down there to bowl on Saturday mornings, and I never will forget they had when they set the pins up, if that red pin came up right in the center, and you got a strike, you'd get a free game out of it. So that was the big deal. Man, you got to get a strike because that's that red pin. So that was one of the things that back in the day was really interesting. And right next door to that, this guy put in a slot car race track. I mean, it was filled the whole building just about, but you could run your little slot cars. They ran on a slot and little electric motor, and you had a controller, and race people there, and that was a big thing too for entertainment. But I guess the Williams Dry Good and Collins Dry Goods, the stores that I can remember, because you could buy everything in there that you had to wear, from shoes to straw hats, I mean, they had it all, and so I remember those stores really well as well.
So and now I've heard others say, but what was the drag in Granbury?
Mostly around the square. I mean, you kind of drag and park around the square and talk to guys, and then the drag may have been from the square out to the drive-in and back. Kind of that drag, and you were almost out in the country. In fact, you were when you got to the Brad's Drive-In. So, but around the square, that's kind of more of the drag. That's where kids congregated, and.
Did you have?
Not many of us had cars though. I didn't have one.
So was there anybody around, law enforcement wise?
Oh yeah.
You
probably already been told these stories, but Herschel Biggs was the local policeman, and persons who shall go unnamed used to pull all kinds of pranks on him. First of all, there was one red light in town right there at the corner of Pearl and Houston, and you could reach the cutoff switch barely, and so unknown persons would cut that light off several times a night. Just there wasn't any traffic; it didn't matter. I mean, it was just to aggravate Herschel, but. There was also a night watchman, a night guard, and he was known to snooze during his shift, so unknown persons would spray painted his headlights with black paint one night, and then got in their car and revved up and peeled out in front of him. He turned the lights on, couldn't see where he was going, so they got away. But just stuff like that, it was just to aggravate the local yokels, they called them.
Kind of a different look on the square.
Oh yeah.
Today from what you're
real different
reviewing there.
Mm-hmm. Real different. Yeah. Buildings were the same. You could get in trouble if you rode your bicycle down the sidewalks of the square. So that was the worst trouble you could get into, was riding your bike down the sidewalk.
Well, James, I wish there was more that I could think about asking, because it's been fun for me to get to have you review some of these things, and I appreciate you doing it for us.
You're sure welcome. It's hard for me to realize that I'm one of the old timers now. I remember when, that, like I told kids, it was BM before money. I remember all that, and a lot of it I want to forget, because it wasn't. They say it was the good old days, and I just say it was the old days. I think the good old days are now. I mean, as far as I'm concerned. But Granbury is so special. I mean, it's just crazy the way it's, like you said, the Renaissance period, how it's bloomed and blossomed. And you look around at how many towns have done what Granbury's done. There's very few. I mean, none, I guess. And for different reasons. We're in the right place at the right time. We're close enough but far enough from the city. And this, let's face it, the city now is where, you know, but it's changing for your medical and some of your giant shopping and your entertainment, a lot of that is. But Granbury has all that too. So I mean, if you don't want to leave, you don't have to, you know. So that's the difference between now and when I was raised up. Because if you had to go, you know, to the hospital or to a specialist, which there were very few of them, you had to go to Fort Worth. Period. They had a hospital here, but only 5 or 6 beds. And a short story, I remember getting when I was growing up, I had bad tonsils, and so Dr. Brock, and Dr. Ross, they were the 2 doctors in town. They had a little hospital up here. My mother took me to see him, and Jared, my little brother, was along with us, and he said, "Man, Dr. Brock said, I think we're going to have your tonsils out. That's the only way to keep this from happening again." And he looked at Jared and he said, "While we're at it, we're just going to take yours out too." So they lined us up, took both our tonsils out. I don't think Jared had ever had any trouble with his tonsils. That's what they did back then. He never forgot that either, Morris.
Preventive tonsillectomy.
Oh yes, tonsillectomy for prevention. Yes.
That is.
While we're at it, we're just going to take yours out too. Pointed at Jared.
Well, okay, James.
Been my pleasure, Morris.
Hey,
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it very much,
Yeah.
and you know, one of these days we may have to do this again.
We'll do it again. There'll be more history behind us.
That's it. Well,
we hope.